You're watching a Highwire Media podcast.
Welcome to a very special holiday edition of Murder Monday on the True Crime Never Sleeps show. As always, I'm your host, Larry Lace. You can find us on Twitter at True Crime Never Sleeps. And of course, subscribe to our channel. Give us a thumbs up if you like our video. Hit that bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And with that, let's dive into today's holiday episode. The holiday season is a time for joy, celebration, and togetherness, but for one community, it became a season of shock and tragedy. Amid the sparkling lights and decorated trees, an unthinkable crime unfolded that would forever cast a shadow over their festive spirit. At the center of this chilling story is Floyd Dennis, whose life was tragically cut short in what would become infamously known as the Christmas tree murder. What happened that fateful night? How did a symbol of holiday cheer become entwined with such darkness? As we unravel the events surrounding this horrific crime, you'll discover a story filled with unexpected twists, haunting details, and a lasting impact that left on all who were touched by it. Stay tuned, because this is a case you will never forget. Christmas of 1925 was a particularly significant one for Floyd Dennis and his young family. Floyd, a 21-year-old laborer, lived in the small town of Hornell, New York, with his 18-year-old wife, Minnie, and their infant son, Keith. This was their first Christmas as a family of three, and Minnie was eager to make it special. Like many young couples at the time, they faced financial hardships. Floyd's job provided enough to get by, but left little for luxuries, like a store-bought Christmas tree. Minnie, determined to make it their modest home festive, expressed her wish for a Christmas tree to complete the holiday atmosphere. Floyd, eager to please his wife and celebrate the season, decided that he would find and cut down a tree himself instead of purchasing one. It was a practical decision for a man trying to save money, and one that seemed simple enough. In Floyd's mind, it was a way to provide for his family in a meaningful and resourceful manner. On the crisp, cold morning of December 21st, Floyd hitched up a cart to transport the tree, placed his infant son Keith inside, wrapped warmly in blankets. He and Minnie set off together, walking to the outskirts of town. It was the kind of day where the chill in the air was offset by the anticipation of Christmas. The couple chatted as they walked, imagining their decorations they would put on the tree and the joy it would bring to their tiny home. As they reached a wooded area just outside the town, Floyd surveyed the trees, looking for one that was small enough to manage, but big enough to be a centerpiece for their celebrations. After a short search, he found it, a modest pine tree standing a little taller than himself. With his hatchet in hand, Floyd began chopping it down, swing after swing. Each swing of the hatchet echoed in the quiet of the woods, a rhythmic sound that seemed to mark the beginning of their holiday preparations. Minnie held Keith close, watching her husband work. When the tree finally fell, Floyd smiled proudly. They loaded it onto the cart and began their journey back home. Floyd felt a sense of accomplishment, as if he fulfilled his role as a provider in a way that would bring happiness to his wife and son. But as they made their way down the road, the peaceful outing took a sudden and unexpected turn. A horse-drawn buggy approached, driven by a man named Lynn Taft. Taft was a 42-year-old farmer and milkman, well known in the community for his straightforward and at times stern demeanor. As the buggy drew closer, Taft stepped out, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of Floyd, Minnie, and the freshly cut tree. "Where do you think you're going with that tree?" Taft demanded, his voice sharp and accusatory. Floyd was taken aback by the sudden confrontation, explaining that he had cut the tree down just a short distance away, believing it to be on public land. Taft, however, claimed that the tree had been taken from his property without permission. His tone grew more aggressive as he accused Floyd of trespassing and theft. Minnie, holding her baby tightly, looked on nervously as the two men argued. Floyd, feeling centered, tried to de-escalate the situation. He explained that he hadn't meant to cause any harm, and that he would be willing to make amends if he had taken the tree from Taft's land by mistake. But Taft, seemingly unconvinced, pressed on, demanded compensation for the tree, threatening to involve the authorities. As the argument escalated, Floyd became increasingly anxious. The presence of his wife and baby only heightened his sense of vulnerability. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small revolver, a weapon he carried for self-defense. Though he had never fired it in anger, Holding the gun at his side, Floyd hoped it would serve as a deterrent, a way to make Taft back down without further confrontation. Taft, however, was unfazed, saying, "You don't even have bullets in that thing," he said dismissively, his voice laced with disdain. He stepped closer, his posture challenging. Feeling trapped and desperate, Floyd raised the gun slightly, still not intending to use it. "It's real," he said, his voice shaking. What happened next would change all their lives forever. In a moment of panic and misjudgment, Floyd cocked the hammer of the revolver to show Taft that it was indeed loaded. Whether it was the tension of the situation or a slip of the finger, the gun discharged. The crack of the shot rang out, startling everyone. The bullet struck Taft in the stomach. He staggered backward, clutching the wound, his face contorted in pain as he dropped to his knees. Minnie gasped, holding Keith even tighter, and Floyd stood frozen, horrified by what had just occurred. Despite his injury, Taft managed to gather himself. With the help of two boys who happened to be passing by, he climbed back into his buggy. The boys, realizing the severity of the situation, drove Taft to the nearby hospital. Meanwhile, Floyd and Minnie, shaken to their core, hurried home with their baby in the tree. The reality of what had happened began to sink in during their silent walk back. Once home, Floyd paced a small living space. Racked with guilt and fear, he repeatedly told Minnie that he hadn't meant to hurt Taft, that it was an accident. Minnie, though equally shaken, tried to comfort her husband. She knew Floyd wasn't a violent man and believed him when he said he had no intention of firing the gun. That evening, Floyd made the difficult decision to turn himself in. He contacted the local authorities and explained what had happened. The police arrived shortly after, and Floyd was arrested and taken into custody. Minnie stayed behind with Keith, unsure of what the future would hold for their family. In the days that followed, news of the shooting spread through the town and beyond. The community was divided in its opinions. Some viewed Floyd as a reckless young man who had escalated a minor dispute to a deadly confrontation. Others saw him as a victim of circumstance, a man who had acted out of fear and desperation in a tense situation. On Christmas Day, just 4 days after the shooting, Len Taft succumbed to his injuries in the hospital. His death marked a turning point in the case, elevating the charges against Floyd from assault to second-degree murder. The incident, which had already captured the public's attention, became widely known as the Christmas tree murder. The name itself seemed to juxtapose the joy and goodwill of the holiday season with the tragedy and violence of the events that had unfolded. For Floyd and Minnie, the holiday season was forever tainted by the memory of that fateful day. What had started as a simple act of love and resourcefulness, cutting down a tree to make their first Christmas with their son special, had spiraled into a nightmare that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. When Floyd Dennis was arrested following the death of Lynn Taft, the small town was thrust into the national spotlight. What had begun as a seemingly simple argument over a Christmas tree ended in tragedy, and now the court was tasked with determining whether Floyd Dennis was a cold-blooded murderer or a troubled young man who had acted out of fear and panic. The trial began on March 24, 1926, and would test not only Floyd's fate, but also the community's sense of justice and morality. From the outset, the prosecution framed Floyd as a dangerous individual whose actions were deliberate and deadly. They painted a picture of a young man who had trespassed onto private property, stolen a tree, and then used violence to silence the rightful owner when confronted. Witnesses for the prosecution recounted the events leading up to the shooting, describing the heated exchange between Floyd and Lynn Taft. According to their testimony, Floyd had brandished a revolver during the argument, cocking the hammer to emphasize this point. The prosecution claimed that this act demonstrated intent, calculated decision to intimidate or harm. The most damning evidence came from the boys who had witnessed the aftermath of the shooting. They testified that Taft had explicitly stated before losing consciousness that Floyd had shot him during an argument over the tree. Though these words, uttered in what would be Taft's final moments, carried significant weight in the courtroom. The prosecution argued that Floyd's decision to carry a loaded weapon showed premeditation, and that his actions went beyond self-defense. But the defense had a different story to tell. Their approach was to present Floyd not as a malicious or violent man, but as someone struggling with deep mental health issues. From the first day of the trial, the defense leaned heavily on the argument that Floyd was not in full control of his actions due to a long history of psychological instability. They painted a picture of a man who had been misunderstood for most of his life, whose mental health had deteriorated under the pressures of adulthood and fatherhood. To bolster their case, the defense called a local doctor who had evaluated Floyd's mental state. The doctor described Floyd as someone with a fragile psyche, prone to irrational thoughts and delusions. He recounted how Floyd had, on multiple occasions, spoken of fairies and other mythical creatures as if they were real. The doctor argued that these delusions were not merely the private product of an overactive imagination, indicative of a deeper mental health issue that impaired Floyd's ability to make rational decisions. The defense also presented testimony from Floyd's family, who described a young man who had always struggled to fit in. They spoke of his unusual behavior as a child, how he often seemed detached from reality, lost in his own world. His siblings described instances where Floyd had become overly emotional or withdrawn in response to minor stressors. They claimed that these patterns continued into adulthood, becoming more pronounced as Floyd took on the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood. One of the most poignant moments in the trial came when Dennis, Floyd's wife, took the stand. Tearfully, she recounted their life together, painting a picture of a husband who loved his family, but often seemed overwhelmed by the challenges of daily life. Minnie spoke of Floyd's desire to provide for her and their infant son, Keith, and how he had insisted on cutting down the Christmas tree himself to save money. She described how Floyd had returned home after the shooting, distraught and inconsolable, repeating over and over that he hadn't meant for anyone to get hurt. Her testimony was a powerful reminder of the human cost of the tragedy, offering a glimpse into the emotional toll it had taken on Floyd and his family. The prosecution, however, was not swayed by the defense's portrayal of Floyd as mentally unstable. They argued that while Floyd might have been under stress, his actions on the day of the shooting were deliberate. They pointed out that Floyd had chosen to bring a loaded gun with him, a decision they claimed demonstrated a willingness to use force if necessary. The prosecution also highlighted the fact that Floyd had not immediately sought help for Taft after the shooting, instead fleeing the scene with his family and the stolen tree. The defense countered this argument by emphasizing Floyd's state of mind in the moments following the shooting. They argued that Floyd's decision to leave the scene was not evidence of guilt, but a reflection of his panic and confusion. They pointed out that Floyd had voluntarily turned himself into the authorities later that day, a decision that suggested remorse rather than malice. As the trial progressed, the jury was faced with a difficult question. Was Floyd Dennis a murderer, or was he a man who had acted impulsively, driven by fear and mental instability? The defense's argument raised broader questions about the nature of intent and responsibility. If Floyd truly believed he was in danger, could his actions be justified as self-defense? And if his mental health issues impaired his ability to assess the situation rationally, should he be held fully accountable for his actions? To provide clarity on these issues, the judge instructed the jury to consider the charges carefully. First-degree murder required proof of premeditation and intent, while second-degree murder allowed for the possibility that Floyd had acted in the heat of the moment without premeditation, but with a disregard for human life. The jury was also allowed to consider the possibility of manslaughter, a lesser charge that would acknowledge Floyd's diminished responsibility due to his mental state. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. This decision reflected a compromise, acknowledging that Floyd's actions were serious and resulted in a tragic loss of life, while also recognizing that there was mitigating factors that complicated the case. Floyd was sentenced to serve 6 to 12 years in prison, a relatively lenient sentence given the gravity of the charges. For residents of the community, the trial was a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the far-reaching consequences of split-second decisions. For Floyd and his family, the verdict was a mixed outcome. He would face punishment for his actions, but the possibility of parole offered a glimmer of hope for the future. The trial of Floyd Dennis remains a compelling example of the complexities of justice. Excuse me. It raises important questions about the role of mental health in legal proceedings, the nature of intent, and the challenge of balancing accountability with compassion. As the courtroom emptied and the town returned to its daily routines, the echoes of the case lingered, serving as a poignant reminder of the thin line between ordinary life and tragedy. When the gavel struck to finalize Floyd Dennis's conviction of second-degree murder, the young man's life, along with the lives of his wife Minnie and their infant son Keith, was irrevocably changed. Sentenced to serve 6 to 12 years in prison, Floyd entered the correction system with the weight of the community's judgment and the lingering trauma of the Christmas tree murder on his shoulders. However, the aftermath of this case is not only a story of punishment, it is also one of resilience, redemption, and the long-term impacts of a single tragic event. Floyd began serving his sentence in 1926, entering a prison system that was far less focused on rehabilitation than it is today. Early 20th century prisons were primarily punitive, emphasizing hard labor and strict discipline for mental health care or personal development. For someone like Floyd, whose defense rested on claims of mental instability, the environment was likely harsh and unaccommodating. Yet, Floyd's time in prison appears to have been marked by good behavior. Reports suggest that he avoided trouble, quietly serving his time while working within the system. This period of incarceration likely gave him ample time to reflect on the events that had led to his imprisonment. By all accounts, Floyd remained deeply remorseful for Lynn Taft's death, often expressing his regret to those who visited or corresponded with him. While he maintained that the shooting was an accident, he accepted the consequences of his actions and seemed determined to rebuild his life once given the chance. Minnie played a crucial role in his journey during these years. Despite the stigma attached to her husband's crime, Minnie remained unwavering in her support. He wrote to him regularly, visited whenever possible, and worked tirelessly to care for their son Keith, while also advocating for Floyd's eventual release. Her faith in Floyd's character and her belief in his ability to turn his life around proved instrumental in securing his early parole. In 1930, after serving just 4 years of his sentence, Floyd was granted parole. His early release was likely influenced by his good behavior, as well as ongoing debates surrounding his mental health and the circumstances of the shooting. While some in the community may have harbored resentment over what they saw as a lenient sentence, others viewed Floyd's parole as an opportunity for redemption. Upon his release, Floyd reunited with Minnie and Keith, who had been waiting for him with open arms. For Floyd, the prospect of rebuilding his life was daunting. He was returning to a world where the stigma of his conviction would follow him, and he faced the challenge of providing for his family while grappling with the emotional scars of his past. Despite these challenges, Floyd was determined to move forward. He and Minnie relocated to Buffalo, New York, where they sought a fresh start away from the lingering judgment of their small-town neighbors. In Buffalo, Floyd found work as a steelworker, a physically demanding but stable job that allowed him to support his family. The move to a larger city also provided a degree of anonymity, giving Floyd and Minnie the space to focus on rebuilding their lives without the constant reminder of their past. Floyd, for his part, sought to distance himself from the events of 1925. He worked diligently to provide for Minnie and Keith, becoming a dependable figure in their household. Outside of work, he developed a surprising hobby that would bring joy and a sense of purpose to his life: magic. Floyd joined the Magicians Association of Buffalo, where he learned and performed sleight of hand tricks and other illusions. His involvement in the organization allowed him to channel his creativity and connect with others in a positive way. For someone who had once been vilified as a criminal, the ability to bring smiles to people's faces was likely a source of profound satisfaction. Meanwhile, Minnie continued to play a central role in maintaining the family's stability. He raised Keith with care and dedication, ensuring that he grew up in a nurturing environment despite the shadow of his father's past. Minnie's strength and resilience were crucial in helping the family move forward. Her efforts ensured that Keith's upbringing was as normal as possible under the circumstances. Floyd Dennis passed away in 1971 at the age of 67, having lived a quiet and largely uneventful life following his release from prison. Many who remained by his side until the end outlived him by more than 2 decades, passing away in 1995. Together, they had navigated the challenges of rebuilding their lives after tragedy, demonstrating the strength of their bond and their commitment to one another. For their son Keith, the legacy of the Christmas tree murder likely casts a long shadow over his childhood and beyond. While there is little public information about Keith's later life, it is clear that his parents worked hard to shield him from the stigma associated with the case, allowing him to forge his own path. The aftermath of the Christmas tree murder is a story of loss, resilience, and the enduring impact of a single moment of violence. It serves as a reminder of the complexities of justice, the challenges of forgiveness, and the possibility of redemption. For Floyd, Minnie, and Keith, life was forever altered by the events of December 21st, 1925. But through perseverance and love, they managed to build a new future, providing that even in the face of tragedy, hope and healing are possible. The Christmas tree murder is a haunting story that lingers in the collective memory of those who study true crime. It is a tale of love, loss, and the fragile nature of human interactions, set against the backdrop of a holiday meant to symbolize peace and goodwill. While the tragedy of Lynn Taft's death cannot be undone, the case offers valuable lessons about the importance of mental health awareness, the dangers of impulsive actions, and the need for compassion and understanding in the face of conflict. As we reflect on this case nearly a century later, it serves as a sobering reminder of the complexities of justice and the enduring consequences of our choices. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And of course, let me know, do you think he should have gone to jail? Or should he have been let off because of mental health issues? Or was the mental health just a cover-up? Let me know. And of course, before we go, we'd like to thank our sponsor of this episode, NordVPN. You know better than anyone as true crime fans, the internet can be a dark and dangerous place. Whether you're diving into deep research, streaming your favorite chilling documentaries, or just trying to keep your online identity safe from lurking predators, one thing is clear: you need protection. That's where NordVPN comes in. NordVPN, you can shield your digital footprint from hackers, trackers, and snoopers. Because while you're uncovering the truth about others, they shouldn't be uncovering anything about you. Think of NordVPN as your personal online alibi. It encrypts your data, hides your location, and unlocks geo-restricted content. You can watch those exclusive true crime documentaries from anywhere in the world. Plus, with ultra-fast servers, you'll never miss a single spine-tingling moment. And here's the kicker: you don't have to search for it. Just use the link in the description to get an amazing deal. That's peace of mind and protection for less than the price of your favorite coffee. Remember, in the world of true crime, knowledge is power, but online safety is survival. Protect yourself today with NordVPN. Of course, hit that subscribe button and bell notification button to be notified of future videos. And as always, thank you so much for watching and listening. If you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, your support helps the channel grow, upgrade our equipment, bring new hosts, be able to pay them, and eventually take this show on the road. Because we'd love to do live episodes from all across the country. Heck, we could have done a live episode from New York for this episode. So, of course, happy holidays. Thanks so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time on the True Crime Never Sleeps show.